I wouldn't be saying anything new if I were to say that the term fighting Irish is not just associated with physical combat. This term represents determination, perseverance, resilience, all qualities that a lot of Irish people take pride in, and rightly so. But the one athlete that isn't at the tip of Irish people's tongues when you talk about Irish female athletes that have made it big is Rebecca Quinn, also known as Becky Lynch. And why is that? Becky Lynch is an Irish professional wrestler, widely known for her time with WWE, where she has become one of the company's most popular and successful female performers. Lynch gained international acclaim for her role in what was dubbed as the Women's Revolution, which aims to elevate the status and portrayal of women's wrestling within the company. Her wrestling persona has gone through several changes over the years, from what she called a shameful debut as she Irish jigged to and on the canvas, clearly ready and hungry for any opportunity she was given, to now standing as the top earning female WWE superstar. But before I go any further, I can basically hear you screaming through the screen, "Professional wrestling is not a real sport!" I hear you. Let's talk about it. Professional wrestling basically marries athleticism with scripted entertainment. While some question its legitimacy as a sport in a conventional sense, which you understand, it is still held to the same standard as boxing and martial arts by the State Athletic Commission. The crux of this debate hinges on wrestling's evolution, specifically its incorporation of theatrical elements aimed at captivating audiences and essentially rescuing the sport from its waning interest. Interestingly enough, the narrative of women's professional wrestling mirrors this evolution. Its roots stretch back to the early 20th century, when women first graced the wrestling arena. But the 1950s were a watershed moment for female wrestlers, where broadcasted matches became more prevalent, propelling promotions like the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, also known as GLOW, into the limelight. A renewed focus on athleticism and skill began to emerge. By the 1990s, women's wrestling underwent yet another dramatic transformation. The Attitude Era boasted compelling storylines and rivalries involving female wrestlers. However, this period still had its challenges. Female wrestlers were often sexualized, their matches relegated to mere minutes, being deemed as the bathroom break, and they were perceived more for their appearance than their talent. Now here is where the tides truly began to shift in the 2010s, when the term diva was replaced with the term superstar, signifying a broader shift in the industry. The women's revolution included longer, more competitive matches and culminated in 2018's landmark all-female pay-per-view event. Today, women's wrestling stands tall in the professional wrestling world, with women often headlining major events. The journey of women's wrestling, from a mere sideshow to a celebrated contest, is testament to the sport's resilience and adaptability. And among the vanguard leading this charge is, you guessed it, Becky Lynch, a trailblazer who has undeniably taken women's wrestling to unprecedented heights. Becky Lynch has been on record admitting that she is not the best athlete on the WWE roster, but nonetheless, what she does is athletic. In fact, it was because of a serious injury that she got in a match that played a massive role in the decision to walk away from wrestling for a few years and get a real job. So in a way, she is equally an athlete as she is a storyteller. Now, you know what I just said there about Becky Lynch walking away from wrestling for a few years? That is usually where the journey ends for a majority of people inside and outside of sport. You're chasing a dream for what feels like forever, and then when that doubt turns into disbelief, you give up. But sometimes things are just meant to be. And Becky Lynch was meant to be a wrestler. And as the story goes, after years of working multiple jobs, she eventually found her way back into wrestling and managed to sign a 2-year deal with NXT, a developmental brand for WWE's main roster. Long story short, her resilience and her commitment to her goals proved to be successful. From being treated like she's disposable to becoming a star of the show, Becky Lynch eventually climbed to the top, winning multiple championships, and also became the only one to hold both SmackDown and Raw championships at once. But what's interesting here is that not that many people outside of wrestling in Ireland became a fan of hers as they would for other Irish athletes when they achieve greatness in a largely competitive sport. For you to understand how big of an athlete Becky Lynch really is, you have to look at the stats, as you would for any other athlete. Not those stats, this one. Unfortunately, you are seeing things correctly. She is the third most trolled female athlete on Twitter in 2021, with Simone Biles and Sha'Carri Richardson taking first and second place. Strangely enough, this statistic shows that the world is watching and clearly has a lot to say, particularly in the US, and that is an important thing to note here. While WWE is a global phenomenon, its primary audience is in the United States, and an athlete's prominence overseas does not translate to the same level of recognition in their home country unless local media is constantly covering their achievements. With all of that being said, wrestling, particularly the grandiose style represented by the WWE, is still not as popular in Ireland in comparison to other sports. And one of the reasons for that could be down to the lack of respect towards it.
That's actually how I ended up main eventing WrestleMania, is I was supposed to be the bad guy, but the audience attached themselves to me so much that there was no possible way I was going to get booed.
I sometimes look at the audience doing that stuff and I think they're not smart. Do you know what I mean? It just seems like, they just seem like Egypts of the grown men shout. You wouldn't get it at the Gaiety Panto. Like, it's just, so I formed that opinion of the audience. But you love them.
But they're invested and they love this because it's storytelling and because it goes in so many different ways, and you always want to swerve the audience, and it's not just grown men, it's children. We're bringing in a whole new female audience, and I love that.
Playing a sport that is not as popular, not as understood by the masses is sometimes a very difficult position to be in. You could potentially become the best of the best, and people outside of the sport still wouldn't know who you are. Now, in fairness, that might sound great for some, but for others, their dream could be to do the sport they love for a living, to perform in front of a sold-out crowd, or even to just not argue with people on the validity of what they pour all their time and money into because it just doesn't make sense. And that's a key word that I'd like to focus on here: validation. Whenever she's interviewed here, Rebecca Quinn, and I'm using her name for a reason here, is constantly hounded on the authenticity of what she does. She has been open about the discouragement from her mother in the early stages of her career to go get a real job, and also that despite the predetermined outcomes of the match itself, which by the way needs to be known internally for it to match the storyline and for no one to get really hurt, what she does along with other wrestlers is very dangerous and requires a high amount of skill and fitness considering the improvisation side of the sport. Where I'm going with this is that throughout her career, Rebecca Quinn didn't get much validation from those around her, but when she got to the top on one of the world's largest platforms, people outside of wrestling over here didn't really find out. And that is testament to anyone who feels like they can only achieve their dream if they move overseas. Athletes, and technically artists too, who achieve greatness outside of their home country sometimes don't get the recognition that they deserve until later on in their careers. If even. Recognizing this sooner rather than later is probably the key to success and attests to Rebecca's grit. I'm now going to start calling her Becky again, and how Becky Lynch's the man persona came to life. Although some might not be too happy with the fact that a woman is calling herself the man, it's quite a powerful way of stepping outside of the limitations that were set on female wrestlers and women as a whole, basically taking it a step further, eyeing men's wrestling and saying, hey, this is my space too. And that's quite impressive. But not only that, she's putting her money where her mouth is with exemplary work ethic and dedication. Something that should definitely be promoted to young girls and women, no matter what they pursue in life. Becky Lynch tweeted that she accomplished nearly everything that she has dreamt of, and that where you've been doesn't indicate where you'll go. Now, I'll be honest with you here, I did not think that this essay would become an inspirational piece, but I genuinely cannot emphasize how much this Irish woman has paved the way for women's wrestling. WWE's audience has grown to become 40% female because women can now see themselves in her or relate to her story, along with her female counterparts, of course. These women were called divas not too long ago. They were hypersexualized and pushed to the side, and are now referred to as superstars, headlining shows and making a living traveling the world, entertaining millions of people year-round. The most important takeaway here is that if you let go of what other people think and keep pursuing the things that light your fire, things will eventually fall into place. And even if the people that you expected would support you the loudest aren't, don't let that stop you, because it didn't stop the Irish powerhouse that is Becky Lynch, and look where she is now.
Yeah, you better. Yeah, you better.